Hey, everybody, welcome to the Ex Nihilo podcast. I'm your host, Eddie. Glad you guys are joining us. Hey, I've got a special guest today. Her name's Shawna Holman. Shawna has done a lot of cool stuff in the space. Most recently, she's had this awesome book come out, and I'm going to tell you about it here in a second. But for the most part, she's done a lot of things that help people live a little less toxic, I should say, a lot less toxic, a little less toxic, but I'm sure she'd be in agreement with being a lot less toxic as well. She's the founder of the site A Little Less Toxic, and she's author of a best-selling book called A Healthier Home. And after battling lifelong altering health issues, which you're going to get to hear about, she was determined to find long-lasting and healthy solutions rather than these harmful quick fixes lots of people in the wellness space like to suggest. Now, this began around 2013, and she started making this journey towards making radical health improvements through these small life changes. Now, A Little Less Toxic is the site that gives people, and people like you, people like me, tips to help like people like us follow these same sort of radical health improvements. Now, her new book is A Healthier Home Cook. Whole food recipes and techniques and tips for families that want to eat a little less toxic. All right, I got through that, Shauna. How did I do?
Great. It's amazing.
Thank you. Awesome. Well, congratulations on the new cookbook.
Thank you so much, and thank you for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Absolutely. Well, we got to know first a little bit about the name, A Little Less Toxic. So, give us the flyby overview of how did you begin this process towards becoming a little less toxic?
Yeah, it didn't happen very easily in the beginning. Well, let me give you the backstory. So I grew up very conventionally, just like most kids of the 80s and 90s, and my parents were doing the best that they knew how at the time with what they were able. But we ate a lot of the conventional things, like the TV dinners or box mac and cheese, a lot of fast food. But we still, tried to get veggies, even if they were out of the can, and we tried to eat well, and we thought we were pretty healthy. I felt like I was very healthy for the most part growing up, and on paper I looked very healthy, but I started to have some kinds of symptoms probably in my late teens to early 20s that I did kind of pay attention to, but then also kind of discounted, like maybe this is just normal to have joint pain as a 19-year-old, or brain fog, or to be getting heart palpitations. And I didn't really pay attention to any of those things after a while, but I started paying attention when my symptoms got louder. And at one point in college, I got a pretty bad, what I thought was maybe a migraine. And I went to the clinic there at the college, and they said it was a sinus infection. And they prescribed me antibiotics. I got like a 5-day Z-Pack. Took the antibiotics, and it went away. And then probably within a month or so, it came back. And so I did the same
Whoa.
thing, and it came back. And then, to kind of make a really long and agonizing story a little bit shorter, this went on for 5 years, and my pain got more and more frequent and more debilitating and would last longer. And so I started seeing I went to my primary, and they sent me to ENT, and then the ENT would send me to an allergist, and then they would say no, and then I would end up going to a neurologist. And so I went through a ton of doctors within my plan trying to figure out what this was, because at some point the medications weren't making it go away permanently, and at some point they weren't even really touching it for the most part. So I would take antibiotics and steroids, and they would kind of help to quash the pain for a time. But in the meantime, I felt like my health was getting worse over time. So this one, like I said, went on for 5 years. It was getting more and more frequent. And
Oh,
I was
wow.
trying, yeah, it was awful. It was really affecting my life too. I was having some pretty debilitating migraine type pain in the front of my face. So it was making it hard to focus and think, and just to live, to have a good
Mhm.
mood and have good energy, and to do what I needed to do. And but I learned to live with it. Actually, I think it's still in here, but one of my friends got me this cute little pill box because I had to carry around with me everywhere I went. Let me see.
Oh,
This one.
wow.
I carried this around with
Oh,
me everywhere, and I took a combination of Excedrin, Sudafed, and Benadryl, and that was the only thing that would kind of like bring back the pain so that I could function. And
oh,
this was going on, like I said, for the 5 years, but the last year of that 5 years, I was not without pain for one single moment of the day for an entire year. And by this point, I'd also had, CAT scans, I had septum correction, I did allergy testing, I was doing anything that they recommended might help, but they never recommended really any kind of like diet and lifestyle change, even though I asked about that too. They said, no, it can't
yeah.
be anything to do with that. And
Mm.
at the end of this 5 years, I had a little hangnail, And I was on antibiotics again because there would be times where I'm like, okay, I'm not going to take these antibiotics right now. I just got to bear through this pain. I'm not going back to the doctor because I know what they're going to tell me. Take the antibiotics and steroids. And I just felt like that's probably not a good idea to be doing so often. But I didn't have any other answers. So eventually I'd go back and take them. So I'm on antibiotics. This is like February of 2013. And I had a little hangnail that felt like it was all of a sudden, I like washed a dog dish and then I'm like, this feels kind of infected. And my husband and I were house sitting and I told him, I think this is infected. It's kind of throbbing. I cleaned it up really good, put a Band-Aid on it.
Yeah.
I told him it's pulsating. So I went to bed with kind of like an alarm going off in my head, but it was bedtime. So we went to bed and I woke up in the morning and he's like, how's your thumb? I said, the pain's gone, but there's this pain in my underarm. So it was like another kind of little red flag pop up, but I don't know what that means. It didn't mean anything to me at the time. And then a little later that day, there was a tender spot on my forearm on the same arm. And now there's like an alarm. There's pain and then pain further up my arm, pain further up that arm, and the next spot is my heart. So if I have an infection that's inside of my body, its next stop is my heart. So my mom's a nurse and she told me to go to urgent care. And so I went to urgent care. They're like, you have a staph infection. You need, guess what? Antibiotics. I'm like, I'm on antibiotics.
I'm
But
taking
they
them.
said, yes, I need a stronger one. So they gave me a shot of a very strong antibiotic and said, don't worry, it will go away now. And if it doesn't, you need to go to the emergency room. So within a couple of hours, I'm looking down at my arm. There's a red line here, a red line here. I'm in line at the pharmacy waiting for another prescription for something topical and texting my mom. And she's telling the doctor what's going on. And the doctor said, if that thing gets any worse, she needs to be in the emergency room yesterday. And I look down and there's a whole red line bulging out of my arm from the entry point on my thumb all the way up to my underarm. So
Oh
I
my
called my
God.
mom, I called my husband, we went to the emergency room, and long story short, I had tachycardia and I had sepsis and MRSA. So I had a very resistant strain of staph infection that was in my blood, and had I not gone to the hospital right then, I most likely would have died. And so I ended up on a week of IV antibiotics, and then I had to follow that up with a month of oral antibiotics, and I'm just completely fed up. And meanwhile, I'm still in pain. Even the strongest antibiotics in the world weren't getting rid of this pain that I had in my head. I'm miserable. And now I'm afraid for my life. And I'm going to the infectious disease doctor now and my primary, and I'm begging them for something to help me. And they have no answers. And again, I asked about diet change. They said, no, it has nothing to do with that. You just have to keep taking the antibiotics. That's literally all we can do for you.
Yikes.
So um awful. And
So
during
so
that
they
time,
so can I ask you a question?
yeah, please.
What so you for 5 years you're on and off of antibiotics.
Yeah.
You get a hangnail and somehow it gets infected
Yeah.
and you're immediately getting you're immediately getting this like sort of red streak or line or swelling up your arm. I mean, I imagine after 5 years, you said the alarms are going off your head. Like, I don't know how I wouldn't be like a hypochondriac by then, just thinking
Mhm.
like every little thing's wrong with me because you're getting all these different surgeries. Like, what was going through your head as this is happening? Are you even trusting the urgent care doctor at this point?
No, I mean, I didn't know what to believe or where to turn. I mean, at church, people were laying hands on me and praying over me because I was miserable and it was really affecting my life, but no one had answers for me. And I wasn't even going to extremes like, I have to find some other, I was just kind of trusting them, like, this is going to go away, or maybe this is just something I have to live with. And it wasn't until that where I thought,
Really?
I got to try something different, whatever that might be. And like I said, I had done the recommendations like, oh, it's a dust mite allergy. So I'll use these dust mite protectors and change my bedding more often and things like that. But nothing touched it at all. And now when I'm on this, I have like a port in my arm. I've got to get these IV antibiotics every day. At this point, I don't know. I didn't know what MRSA was. I didn't know what sepsis was. I don't know if I'm going to get anyone else sick. I was kind of isolated, and I was just with, it was my husband, my mom, and my mother-in-law were the only ones that would like come near me. And I'm just at home, just miserable. My mom happened to see, I feel like it was all divine intervention, but she saw on
Mhm.
PBS, I think of all places, some nutritionist talking about inflammation and
Yeah.
saying, this is a sign, this is a symptom of inflammation. I could have checked off like 15 or 20 things on these boxes. And like I said, they were a lot of things that I just took to be normal. Like, yeah, everyone gets joint pain or everyone gets headaches or whatever it might be. But she recommended, pulling some things out of your diet and seeing if that could make a difference with your inflammation. And so I ended up doing an elimination diet to see if any of those things were making an impact on my pain. And so I just started reading ingredients on things, and I'm like, okay, I can't have these 7 things for 21 days. And then I'm going to reintroduce things one at a time and see if I have a reaction. Well, I pulled the things out, and it wasn't even a week or two before my pain that I had had all day, every day for the last year was completely gone. I'm completely out
Wow.
of pain. My joint pain's gone. My brain fog's gone. I'm sleeping even better. My mood is better. My energy's better. My skin is clearer. My hair feels better. Just it was like I was like a new person. It was like when I became a Christian as an adult. And for me, it was a similar experience where it was like the veil had lifted and I could finally see things for what they were. And it just rocked me. It completely rocked me after a few, maybe 2 weeks of this. No, that's not true. So after 3 weeks of this, I start reintroducing the things to see if I get a reaction. And so I think the first thing I reintroduced was probably gluten. And I did. It took 24 hours, but I got a reaction. So the headache came back. And I'm like, okay, well,
Wow.
I'm not going to eat that for now. And the process is that you're going to pull these things out. Most of them can be really healthy. And then if you heal, you can reintroduce them, right? Couldn't
Hmm.
eat gluten, couldn't eat soy, couldn't eat dairy. Or actually, I didn't even test dairy. I couldn't eat eggs. I was like, after 3 days of egg testing, I'm like back in this horrible pain. So after the 3 weeks of reintroduction, I'm like, I don't even want to try dairy. I am so much happier eating this way and
Yeah.
feeling like this. So it took me years before I tried to reintroduce dairy. But that's what kind of opened up my eyes to all these things. I started just reading ingredients on food at first, but then it became
Hmm.
everything, just paying more attention to what I was putting in, on, and around my body.
What was the who was you saw something on PBS? So do
Yeah.
you remember like their story or who they were or anything like that?
Yes, a nutritionist. Her name is JJ Virgin. She's really well known, and her book at the
Oh,
time was
yeah,
called,
for
yeah,
sure. Yeah.
yeah. I'm sure
That's
you,
awesome.
yeah.
The
Uh,
Virgin Diet. Yeah, like I
That's
have
what I
that book.
did. Yeah, that's what it was.
Really?
It
Yeah.
changed my life. It was crazy. Yeah.
That is
Mhm.
awesome.
Yeah, that was my introduction to all of this. And like I said, I didn't have any really understanding of any of it, but it made sense. Like inflammation. Yes, I'm
Hmm.
inflamed. And taking all the antibiotics in combination with me continuing to do things that were inflaming me made my body so weak that a hangnail almost cost me my life.
My goodness. Well, there's so many stories like this all around the country. I mean, I'm sure you've heard them, but I've got family, friends, acquaintances from all over the country that have got these like bizarre, confounding symptoms that they can't explain, and they go into a doctor, and the doctor's like, take this pill, and the pill doesn't work. It maybe makes it worse, and they get surgery after surgery, or and they go to clinic after clinic and specialist after specialist, and pretty soon they're like depressed and they're on SSRIs because they're depressed, and I just like I can't believe that the circumstances of you finding JJ Virgin, on your mom finding JJ Virgin out of all people on PBS is what led to you finding healing. I mean, that's crazy.
It was really bananas. Yeah. Was it there? I don't remember. I think it might be like a Hippocrates or something. There's a saying that the person who takes medicine has to recover twice, once from the disease and once from the medication. And that is absolutely what I was
Yes,
walking through. Yeah. But it was really
that's
simple,
right.
small changes that helped me come back to health.
So there's people all around the country that are dealing with these almost similar issues. I mean, there's people in getting surgeries right now because they've got these hyper specialized doctors that are trying to sort of like cut into them, and maybe you've got opinions and thoughts on sort of like the sort of the gigantic system that is like the United States healthcare system, and the segmentation of studying individual parts of the body, but never really getting that holistic approach. How do you feel like getting a holistic approach can get into the mainstream for most people so that they can get the preventative care they need and do things like these elimination diets that can actually help them and serve them?
Yeah, it's tricky, right? Because I think the system is kind of designed that it gets really, really specialized and everything's kind of isolated. Like the body's all these separated like silos that don't
Yeah.
interact with each other. And so the system is kind of, it didn't used to be that way, but that's the way that it is now. And it's hard for some people to, like for me it was, it's not that I didn't respect my doctor's opinions, but and
Yeah.
I did, I didn't want to disrespect them. I trust their training, but there's more to the equation than what they know. And they go based on their own training, and sometimes it's this like top down problem where they're getting fed information. It's like, oh, they get no nutritional training at all. They're doing the best they
Yeah.
can. I have a lot of medical professionals in my family, have great respect for that work, but I think there's a big
Definitely.
missing link that we don't see the person as a whole. We get into these isolated silos of specialized care, and we don't have any value really for nutrition or proper nourishment, or the toxic soup that we all live in.
The toxic soup. Yeah, that's a good way to put it. So how did you, okay, so back to your story. So how did you, as you did this elimination diet,
Yeah.
how did you then kind of figure out what were the things that maybe were causing your issues? And I don't know if you mind sharing, like, for specifically, like what actually was your particular issue? I know not everyone's the same, but it'd be just out of curiosity, what was affecting you?
Yeah, well, for sure it was those specific, like the JJ Virgin thing she has you pull out. I think it's gluten, soy, dairy, eggs, and then
Hmm.
artificial sweeteners, corn. Did I get them all? Did I say seven? I have one more. I always
Sounds about
forget
right.
one. Peanuts. And then she's like, you
Oh, wow.
reintroduce the ones that can be beneficial to your health. The other ones you just leave out forever. Right. So
Mhm.
like I said, it took me years to reintroduce dairy just to even try it because I felt so good. I didn't want these things anymore. But when
Right.
I get accidentally glutened, even today, it's 11 years later, if I accidentally eat gluten, at least in the United States, I have a
Hmm.
reaction. It usually takes me about 24 hours, but I get that same migraine that I used to get. So for me, a
Whoa.
lot of those food items that can be healthy for most people, they were triggering inflammation for me. And there are a variety of reasons for that. And
Hmm.
when I did reintroduce them, I tried to get the best quality I could so that it wasn't a quality issue. I was just so inflamed, I wasn't tolerating them well. And
Yeah.
we see that a lot with people getting food sensitivities, and it's just an inflammation thing. It's not really a problem with a specific food in
Hmm.
its nature. But yeah, so for me, it was those things. And then along the way, because now I'm reading ingredients on everything, which I never did before. It was a front of the
Hmm.
package, like, oh, it's 100-calorie pack. This is healthy. I'll have that and some carrot sticks, and wheat thins or whatever. Like I was
Wheat thins.
marketing and calorie driven. And
Oh,
so I'm turning packages around. I'm reading what's actually in them because I know I'm not going
yeah.
to have these 7 ingredients. But now I'm starting to see a lot of other ingredients. I'm like, why am I eating that anyway? So I
Yeah.
just started finding, some alternatives for those items that I had been buying and ingesting regularly before, and just eliminating some of it from my life that just wasn't necessary too. And
Yeah.
then meanwhile, while I'm doing that, I'm reading ingredients on, my cleaning products or my personal care products, and just noticing, man, there's a lot of stuff that is probably not serving me very well. And I bet I can find or make an alternative. So I just have been doing that since 2013, a little along the way, a little less toxic.
Just a little bit about a time, which is obviously the moniker that you've served some people with across the last 10 years or so. What did you add any of those back in? Do you eat eggs or
I eat
gluten? You
eggs.
don't eat gluten.
Yeah, I still can't do gluten. I don't do great with soy, but eggs and dairy I do. I do raw milk. I know that can be
Mhm.
controversial, but I
Yeah.
think I've done especially well with raw milk products, and other like fermented milk products.
Yeah.
I do even better with than just like a conventional dairy. And I do try and have like better quality dairy when I do have that, and eggs as well, but I don't have any reaction from those anymore.
It's fun to try to make the theological connection for me because I just can't help it. As a pastor, someone who's you know done some theological training. I see that, like, it seems to me, just and this is maybe my own experience, but basically people I've interviewed on this show and talked to beyond and read many books, that the food that is as close to the way it was intended to be consumed as seems to be what's best for you. So like raw dairy you mentioned, well, yeah, like if it's not pasteurized, the protein's not denatured, and there's hasn't been there's not this insane amount of heat, and it's cows that are fed what they're supposed to be fed, you seem to do better on. It's pretty weird, right? Like grass-fed animals, wild caught fish, organic plants and fruits like seem to be more beneficial than things like grain in the United States. It's been genetically modified and crossbred and all these different things for taste and for economic reasons. Are you seeing that as well, or is that just me?
Yeah.
Am I living
Yeah.
in La La Land?
No, I think there was like a divine order to me learning these things too, because if I had learned this stuff before being a Christian, maybe it would have just kind of manifested differently in my life. But
Mhm. Yeah.
knowing Jesus first and then learning about how intricately made my body is and how it is meant to work with his design and creation so beautifully, I think it was really
Mhm.
powerful. And I look at these things, yeah, a similar way too, that every time we move things further away from God's perfect design, we have consequence, whatever that might be. Yeah, I see it.
That's
Yeah,
really good.
I think, yeah,
I love that. Well, and you're coming from your own experience of like living out the ramifications of that, and I think you've sort of stress tested the American healthcare system along the way,
yeah,
and you've gone like, okay, well, like let me just eat, whatever. There's a food pyramid, and there's common knowledge, and kind of how I was raised, and I'll just kind of eat that stuff, and maybe try
mhm,
to be a little healthy. Oh wait, like I'm getting sick. I'm getting surgery. You get sepsis, MRSA, the plague. My
yeah,
goodness, you had everything at once, and you're realizing, oh wait, like this isn't working. And then something as simple as an elimination diet can sort of tell you, man, look at all the things that are actually causing me harm. So if you're eating, you know, just modern United States, you said it kind of small. I think it might be interesting, worth going down, which is like, if I eat gluten here in the United States,
yeah.
like there's some that implies there's something different about the way gluten's produced here than other places. Or are
Mhm.
we? Am I tracking with you?
Absolutely. Yeah, in other countries they haven't changed their farming practices as drastically as we have.
Hmm.
Most places, like I've traveled to
Yeah.
Costa Rica and they do not allow anything. They used to be Monsanto was trying to come in there. They're now owned by Bayer, which is a pharmaceutical corporation.
Yikes.
But Costa Rica did not let them in. I remember like the tour guides talking to us about it, like, and here's our farming and like telling us like we're not letting Monsanto in here. And I'm over there like, yeah, good. um, but yeah, in a lot of other countries, there are different regulations or just different practices. And the food, most people find that they can eat in other places, even if they can't eat here. And I have found that to be true for me the few times that I've traveled abroad.
Wow.
Mhm.
Yeah. I hear that all the time from people. You're like, yeah, I was able to go over there and I had like pasta in another country or some kind of bread and it didn't affect me the same. Did you say that Bayer owns Monsanto?
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
That,
Yeah.
that's totally not, it's totally coincidence,
No,
right?
and it's super chill. Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that at all.
Just two
Yeah.
mega titan powers, one in pharmaceuticals and the other in food production, totally aren't related to one another. In the sense,
Yeah.
it does seem though that when you eat Monsanto's, the product of their labor, so to speak, you end up utilizing Bayer a lot more too.
Yeah, yeah, I feel like they have a really good business model, if they
Yeah.
can if they can allow things that cause you to get sick, but then they sell you the pill at the same time, then they've got a great business model. I heard something today that was like corporations don't have a conscience, and I think that is
Yeah.
so true. The bigger the entity becomes, the further they probably are removed from like the connection to people and maybe the impact that what they're doing might have. And it's a machine. They're thinking about profit,
Mhm.
so that's a great business model for them, but it's not a great recipe for health for us. Yeah.
Well, I think the veil's been pulled back in modern society for the most part. I think whatever reason, like politics, maybe it was COVID-19, maybe it's just the fact that social media is so prevalent. People are starting to sort of lose trust in these like major big institutions. And I don't know if it's just access to information or what it is, but maybe 15, 20 years ago, we'd say, oh, come on, like there's no way the government would steer us wrong. There's no way that they couldn't get a product passed through the FDA and it would be bad for us. And we're kind of seeing, well, actually, it happens like most of the time.
Yes.
And you really do have to take responsibility for your own health and not outsource that to, educational institutions or the government or
Yeah.
politics or anything like that. It seems like that should be the way we think going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. And I hope people can remember this time a little longer because I think as a people have a tendency to forget. I'm in the book of Numbers right now. Like the Israelites keep forgetting where they came from.
Right.
They like want to go back to their stuff. And I think that we have a tendency to do that too. So I had a lot of hope for people that were kind of having the veil pulled back during all the COVID stuff that was going on that kind of wasn't adding up. And they're like, is this actually good for my health? And a lot of people it kind of has helped them to see things more in, I think, a clear light, and I'm hoping that we can continue moving in that direction. But yeah, like I said, people have a tendency to forget. I was trying to remember the name, but there's been so many things over the course of history, like even if you think about cigarettes, for example, where there was, your doctor, this is their preferred brand, and there are all these ads and everything saying that they're safe and good for your health, and actually
Oh.
this type of tobacco is even better for you, and there's been nonsense like this since the dawn of time, especially when you get
Mhm.
corporations and media, when they have, profit coming from it too involved. It can really make things muddled and confusing. And I think we have to be able to step back and look at things from a kind of unbiased perspective and think about logically what makes most sense here.
There was a old timey labels going around of like medicines from the early 1910s. We had those traveling doctors on the wagons,
Yes.
and one of the labels had a cough syrup. Like if you had a cold, this is what you'd take, and it had the ingredient list was bourbon, cannabis, chloroform, and radium. So if you want to really get knocked out, I mean, I imagine you'd be
You
knocked
won't
out for days
cough.
on end. You won't cough, you might not live, but afterwards you feel like $1 million.
That's great. Yeah.
Speaking of mega corporations, can we talk about Kellogg's for a second? You've been on the bandwagon as well as many others, sort of help folks in the health and wellness, functional medicine space, talking about Kellogg's. There's a massive petition going around this idea of Kellogg's, like sort of producing one product for the United States and producing other products for other countries. Can you talk a little bit, give the listener information on what exactly is going on and why you think it's against you and against your principles, so to speak?
Yeah, I think it's a corporation problem mostly, but we see this a lot. And it's not just Kellogg's, but I think people have to like kind of pick one area to kind of focus on at a time and then hope that it catches fire, right? Or that they can move on to the next and make change. And so there were a few people that started this petition. It was almost a year ago when the petition began. It was by Vani Hari, who's known as the Food Babe, and Jason Karp. He's the founder of, he's involved in a lot of this food industry. He founded Hugh Chocolate, and Callie Means, who has this wonderful best-selling book out right now with his sister, who used to be a surgeon. It's called Good Energy. Highly recommend if anyone is interested in that. But they
I've been
started
pumping
this.
that book so
Oh,
much. I feel like I
so
should get
good.
commissions.
It's so good. Oh, life changing. Yeah, I'm like giving it to friends. But yeah, they started this petition probably almost a year ago to get Kellogg's to they serve one set of ingredients in the United States because they're allowed to, but in other places they serve different ingredients. And it doesn't mean that they're healthy in these other countries, but there are some ingredients that we know are potentially harmful in the American version that they're continuing to put in there, which in specifically in this petition is food coloring and BHT, which have
Mhm.
potential harmful effects. And they're saying, well, it's still legal, so we're going to do it. And I think one of their reasonings was because the kids in studies, they liked the more brightly colored ones better. But like, we're going to let kids pick what's best for them, then they should probably pick their own bedtime and run out into the middle of the street too. So people are fed up with this double standard of like, you can already make this in a way without those ingredients other places and you do it, but you're not doing it for your own American citizens. So people are kind of fed up by that. And so the petition was made, and I think it was signed by almost 500,000 people. And there was a rally outside their headquarters a couple blocks away where lots of different health leaders came and spoke about, why this needs to change. And they went over to deliver the petitions, and they accepted the petitions but wouldn't meet and talk with these people. And so it's kind of stirred up even more fire under everyone saying like, you know what, just cancel Kellogg's altogether. And one of the things that I shared about it is, I don't buy Kellogg's anyway. What does this have to do with me? But even though I don't, it's not like I live in a bubble. I go out in the world and I go to people's homes and I see with on their shelves, or what they're bringing to our camping trips and things like that, the most people in this country are buying those products, and that's why they continue to sell them. They're on, you virtually all the shelves. You have to go to specialty stores to not see their
Always.
products. And not only that, I used to teach fourth grade, and these products were given to kids on free lunch, free breakfast every single day. They're being fed these dyes and these preservatives and other ingredients that we know are potentially harming their health, and there's nothing that anyone can do about it, or so we think. So I think it's just raising awareness is a big thing, so that people see that there is a potential problem with these kind of things, and that there's an alternative. There's something we can do about it, and put pressure on these companies to make their products a little less toxic, so that they can be. We're not expecting a breakfast cereal to be a nourishing health food, right? But if people are going to continue to buy it, it would be nice if they could put a little less poison in it.
Yeah, I agree with you. I'm not feeding my kids like boxes of Kellogg's cereal or anything, but I think the premise makes a lot of sense. And didn't California recently ban four
Yeah.
ingredients, and that's caused a stir? Red
Yep.
three, and it's like brominated something, vegetable oil or something that
Yeah.
cause
Yeah.
cancer. Do you know anything about that? Am I
A
tracking, or is
little
that
bit,
something
yeah.
else?
It's some of the food
Okay,
dyes and the BVO. BVO used to be in Gatorade until people
that's
raised
right.
a ruckus about that. And then, initially there was a lot of pushback, like, oh, it's not even, it's safe, until then the studies come out to follow that say, actually, maybe it's not safe. And then we get the regulation. So I always try and remind people, we don't have to wait for a law to tell us that something's not the best for us. We don't have to wait for a policymaker to tell us that that's not the best idea. We can
Yeah.
do the right thing right now, for ourselves and our own families. But it would be great if we're going to have regulations, that they would be well intended and well applied, I guess.
Yeah. Well, I
Yeah.
think the one of those ingredients was the red three, or what. One of those was produced in Skittles, and
Hmm.
first of all, yeah, Skittles, what an abomination. Anyway, but like the idea that we know that these cause cancer,
Yeah.
and at least many of the studies show that, and we still feed them to mostly predominantly children.
Yeah.
And yet other countries, like these products, just much like Kellogg's, is producing other they're producing other formulas of the same product and marketing it to European countries or other countries because it's illegal. It's illegal there to feed them that, but in the United States it is. It's totally legal for them to give these products, and I guess the bright colors and maybe the addictive properties or whatever it is. That just kind of speaks to like the awareness of like what else are they allowing us to
Right.
eat that other countries don't, or they know is
Right.
bad for us. It feels a little bit ominous and a little bit frightening to think about,
Right.
which is why
Yeah.
people should probably stay away from brightly colored things, these food dyes and things, which is one of the things you eliminated from your diet initially.
Mhm. Yeah, I like to share this information too, because not everyone knows when tobacco started coming under heat, because we started having now the data and the research and the science to show that their products were contributing to cancer. They panicked, and the big tobacco guys, at least two of them, one of them being Philip Morris, bought up a bunch of food companies, and they took their same junk tobacco science to the food industry, and they trick and manipulate people, and they're really good at pushing a product and making it addictive. And they're doing the
Wow.
same concepts now, but with our processed food. And they've got
Wow.
people so under their thumb that we will fight for our drug of choice, which a lot of times now are these highly processed foods.
I can't help but laugh because knowing what we know about the cigarette industry now,
Mm.
we think, yeah, like I couldn't believe anybody would ever. Do you imagine a doctor smoking a cigarette
Yeah.
while they're checking your pulse and going, "Hey, have you tried the new, American Spirits or I don't know brands of
Yeah.
cigarettes?" But like, can you try these? These are great for you. You're like, that's ridiculous. It's very similar to a doc. You go to a doctor, you're saying, I've got all these issues, and you say, could it be my diet? And they're like, oh no, that's totally crazy. I literally had a doctor say to me, without the acronym, that's BS.
Uh-huh.
Don't worry about your diet. It's not that. Here's a
Right.
Prilosec. Take that instead. And so for a doctor to say that, it feels very similar. I don't know if we're on the same path. I suspect we might be, but it's a little scary to me, frankly.
Yeah. Yeah, and I don't think that most of them are nefarious by
Right.
intent. I think that they are doing what they're taught to do, and they're taught to prescribe. I think it's less than a full day of training on nutrition. They don't understand how food affects our bodies
That's
unless
crazy.
they somehow, outside of their insane schedule of coursework and training and residency, that they then somehow find the time to study nutrition on their own. Most of them just do not know the impact that these things can have, and so
Right.
they're gonna tell you what they've been taught. And unfortunately, I think they're missing a really, really huge part of the puzzle.
So let's try to help a few people if they're listening. What
Mhm.
what are some things maybe you might see people doing or eating health wise that might be harming them without knowing? Are there any common things people
Yeah.
do as it relates to diet that you might say, hey, you should probably think twice about that? Like, let's set
Yeah.
Skittles aside. People, I think,
Yeah.
mostly get that those are terrible. But is there anything else?
Totally. I think if you want to make it, because it can be really overwhelming, right? I'm reading the label on every single item I buy. This is overwhelming. I don't know what these ingredients are. And some people will say if there's an ingredient in it that you don't understand, don't eat it. And I think that's a fine approach. But for some people, it depends where you're starting from. I know a lot of people that
Hmm.
listen to your show, they probably already care a little bit more about their health than the average American. But if not, I would say that you can start with some really simple things like don't eat anything with these artificial colors, don't eat anything with artificial flavors, and don't eat anything with artificial sweeteners. And if you just keep it to those three things, you're going to eliminate a lot of the junk and have things that are a little more nourishing. And I think it's a really simple way, but it really is going to cut down your options a lot. But as soon as you see that, you see all the things that have those three items in there, it's going to open your mind to realize how much you're ingesting these things without even thinking about it. So I would start there.
That's good. That's a good
Mhm.
principle to because it's simple. I think most people can manage that. Like, hey, just eat foods that are whole foods. So stick to your meats and your vegetables. If it's rice, if it's potatoes, eat those things. But anything in a giant weird box with 9,000 ingredients, just stay away from that and like let's see what happens. I think that's a good first, second step for
Yeah.
most people.
Yeah, move away from the processed things more and more. I mean, there you can have anything's processed, right? Like a plain pasta in a package is processed, but it's not as processed as something like a Skittle, right? So we move
Yeah.
away from the ultra processed things and have things that are more fresh and try and incorporate, like you said, those things like real whole foods like meat, eggs, dairy, vegetables, fruit. And I try and stay away from any of the extremes. I know they can serve people a really good purpose, especially during a period of acute injury or illness. But I
Mhm.
think that it's important to find a place where you can sustain something over time. So if you're going to be, like fully, I don't even want to name any of them, but the diet can get really dogmatic. And I
Yeah.
think again, it can serve a purpose and people have different, reasons behind why they choose to do that. But in the long run, I think if you stick to just eating things more in the way that God intended them, the way that they were designed to be in nature, to work synergistically with our bodies, then you're just going to feel a lot better and you're going to crave those other things less. They're going to start to, what happened with me anyway, and a lot of people that I know, the things that are more processed do not taste good anymore when I have them. If I were to eat them more, they would take control of my taste buds again, and then real food wouldn't taste as good.
Hmm.
But as it stands for me right now, real food tastes alive and vibrant to me, and processed things taste like chemicals.
Yeah, over time,
Spicy.
you actually your I don't know if it's your palate or whatever of what the scientific word is for it, but you just start to notice
Yeah.
when you're drinking something or eating something artificial. Like if you're eating mostly meat and vegetables and things like that for a long period of time. Like I remember, I think my forget who it was, but we were at a coffee and we had this like energy drink someone left at our house. Like, oh well, I'll just like take a couple sips to like get to the coffee until I can get to a coffee shop. And I took a couple sips, like, whole, I just hadn't had one in so long that it overwhelmed me with like this, like, it tasted like, I don't know, like solvent or something. Where I was like, wow,
Yes.
this is, and I remember a time where I was totally used to eating that. And I can't believe the effect on how, maybe a couple months or years can go to changing the way you kind of sense things in your own mouth.
Yeah, for me, it was literally within those 3 weeks where I went from things tasting, like regular Whole Foods tasting pretty bland and dull to me.
Yeah.
And then within 3 weeks, I'm eating an almond and it tasted like dessert. And I know that sounds like extreme, but it's true. But it was one
Yeah.
of those like aha moments that I had to lose the grip that these, like, they're drugs they had on my body, and they affect your mind. They're very addictive by design, and they changed my palate, my taste buds. They changed my actual brain function to crave them and think that they tasted better than real food. But for me, it was 3 weeks. It can make a huge difference.
3 weeks, an almond tastes like dessert, folks. You heard it right here. Like, it
I
is
wouldn't
totally
say they still
possible.
taste like dessert today.
Oh, that's so great. Well, it does. It makes a lot of sense though, because people are kind of wondering, like, man, there's no way to get out of this. And you mentioned something around, it's by design,
Yeah.
causing people some of the processed food to create these addictions. And I think if we kind of bring some awareness to the fact that food sometimes made in a lab is not just made with these like altruistic motives to help you have a great happy meal and to for you to enjoy. It's actually designed to create an addiction, so that way you purchase more of their product. Like the bottom dollar, the economics of the situation, in many cases, not all cases, but in many cases, is the ultimate goal. And I don't know about you, but I don't. If someone's like motives are financially, if they're financially motivated to do something, that could be fine, that could not be fine. But if that also includes them trying to produce something that is going to either hurt me or harm me, i've got to I've got to take that seriously and kind of really deeply consider whether they're trying to addict me or if the product is just tasty. And I think sometimes we conflate those two things.
Totally. Yeah. Yeah, I
Mhm.
agree.
Yeah.
Especially since becoming a parent, I feel a deeper sense
Yeah.
of duty to be a little more mindful about that. Yeah.
Well, let's kind of transition to the new book, because it's on the same similar topic, healthier home cook. Like, why did you write the book? I'm assuming there's a lot of the reasons we just talked about are reasons, but why,
Yeah.
what was the primary motivation? You could have wrote any number of books, but why
Yeah.
did you write this one? And there's some lovely photos of your kids in the book, which is pretty cool, or your family, which is pretty awesome too.
Yeah. Let's see. So why I wrote the book is because there was a demand for it. But the way that demand came to be is because I share what I'm cooking online, because I'm a
Mhm.
busy, we homeschool. I've got this random business that I didn't mean to grow that I'm trying to steward really well. I have a husband and, just a busy, full community life. And so I'm not always able to share all the like educational content that I am in other seasons, but I know I can almost always at least share what I'm cooking. So people
Yeah.
are always demanding, like, when are you going to make a cookbook? Because what happened for me is once I started eating more real foods, I was a person, like I said, I was eating fast food and all these other things beforehand, and I really liked them. And I missed some of the things. So I couldn't have a Crunchwrap Supreme anymore, but I can make it at home. I'm sure I can figure it out.
Yeah.
I loved Chick-fil-A. I don't eat that anymore. I would eat like literally 6 of those little containers of Chick-fil-A sauce. I can make that myself. So I've just had to recreate things myself with ingredients that make me feel good, and I feel good feeding my family. And I've gotten pretty good at it over the years, and I make some pretty awesome meals that my family loves. And so my Instagram community kept saying, when are you going to write a cookbook? When are you going to write a cookbook? And then a publisher reached out to me and asked me to write a book. And I said, yes, everyone would like a cookbook. And they said, no. They're like, you're not really like a food blogger. I'm like, okay, but the people want a cookbook. So I wrote A Healthier Home, which I knew would be helpful too. And that did really well. So then my publisher said, let's write another book. And I said, a cookbook. And they said, no. And then I went into my messages on Instagram and I just put the keyword cookbook, and I pulled up hundreds of messages of people saying like, we need a cookbook. And I sent them
Yes.
screenshots and they're like, all right, let's do it. And so that's why I wrote it, because the people really wanted it. And I also wanted a place to have all of my recipes in a collection that I can turn to and I could pass down to my kids, because prior to this, I have a 3-ring binder in my kitchen where if I made something that we really liked, I would type type it up real quick and then pop it in a
Hmm.
sheet protector in the 3-ring binder. But once I started sharing things on Instagram, I started posting my recipes there instead. I didn't have time to do both. So I'd have to scroll Instagram to find my own recipes. And
Wow.
that's what everyone else was doing too. And then a friend turned all of those into a book for me. But I've continued to make recipes since. So it's kind of been this organic evolution. But now 75 or more of our family's favorite recipes are now in this printed, published book so that we can use it and everyone else can too.
That's so cool. I love that idea. It's a forcing function. Your platform, what you built, like people are like, no, like tell us how to eat. Like tell us what are the exact things we need to be eating. And then the publisher's like, no, like that's not going to sell. And you're like, no, this is literally what people want. I don't know how to tell you this, but and usually they're nice enough. They'll bend to the will of the of whoever of the demand. But
It's
what?
the
So
demand.
what's so are these recipes all like sort of things like offshoots of things you used to enjoy with other ingredients, or are
Uh,
these just like typical things we just love to eat these things and so we produced them?
yeah.
Like why were people asking so much for the cookbook?
I think it's a combination of both. So there
Mhm.
are some things in there that, like, my family likes to get at a local restaurant that I'm like, I could make that at home. I could make it with
Yeah.
better ingredients. And so I make it here, and it turns out we like it even better. So I just make it a million times because everyone requests it. So it's a combination of both. There's some things that would be, a recreation of something, like an acai bowl that you might spend
Hmm.
$15 for, and it would be loaded with sugar, right? Because they're gonna
Right.
like add apple juice to it or whatever. But you can make it at home, and you can make it
Totally.
protein packed and low on sugar and full of fiber, and at a fraction of the cost. Things like that. So it's got breakfast. It's got uh, I call it sustainable, or like they're big hearty salads, and
Yes.
soups and stews, and then other kinds of dinners. Like I've got a bacon wrapped meatloaf in there. Like they're not all like this. You think a healthier home cook means you have to be eating like a rabbit, but you can be eating nourishing foods that are fun and satiating, and you just gotta, pick better sources and refine your ingredients a little bit.
Yeah. Wow, that's really cool. Yeah, I mean, I was looking at some of the photos online. Like I told you, I've got my cookbook ordered. But yeah, like the sushi bowl, that looks
Yeah,
super good. The French toast casserole. Come on.
so
Some of
good. And
these
I've
look
been adding chocolate
unbelievable.
chips to that. Dark chocolate chips in a French toast casserole. It's great.
Gee.
Antioxidants, you know.
Exact. So what's your favorite? I mean, do you have a few favorite recipes out of the book that are your absolute tops?
No, there's some I probably make more than others. The rainbow
Hmm.
salad, that just came about. Like I have two kids. They're 9 and almost 8 now, but I've been making all of these recipes with them and for them since they came around. But they would be like 2 and 3 sitting up on the counter with me, and I'm trying to prep lunch. So we made this rainbow salad. I'm like, let's find something of every color in the refrigerator in the pantry we can and turn it into a salad. And so that became rainbow salad. And it's like one of our favorite things that I make probably at least once a week still. And this is years and years later, So that's probably one really big family favorite. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to pick. There's so
The
many good ones.
rainbow
It depends
salad.
on.
I love
Yeah.
that.
Yeah,
That's
it's
really
so
cool.
good.
So, as we kind of wrap up here, you got so many people that are following you online that are looking for like a new way forward. Maybe they've shared some version of your story where they tried a bunch of different things and their health hasn't hasn't really gotten better because they haven't found that solution, or maybe they're just really interested in learning how to be a little less toxic. What do you think are the one or two things you could say to someone who was in your shoes, who was in that spot at the hospital in the quick care, that are like, man, what do I do? I can't find a solution, but they don't have the wealth of knowledge that a nutritionist on PBS could
Yeah.
offer them. Yeah, like what are some tips that you could say if there's somebody in that exact situation right now? What would you say to them?
Yeah, I think if you're in a pit of a health crisis right now, it's really hard and it can be very demoralizing. It can be isolating and debilitating. And I think when we're sick, it's hard to do the things that might be helpful. So I would say to start small and make it sustainable so that you can continue to put one foot in front of the other and keep moving forward. And think about the things that you're in contact with the most. So that might be food, because we're all going to eat multiple times a day and it's actually entering into our body, but also things that maybe you're putting onto your skin. And simple things that you can, without having to buy more things, you can eliminate things, like maybe get rid of your scented candles because they're not serving you any good purpose. Or, open your doors and windows every day so that you get fresh air circulating into the house, and go outside with your shoes off and get in contact with nature. Move your body. There's so many things that you can do that are absolutely free that can make a huge impact. And the other things, just do one little change at a time and continue to just keep going in that direction. You do not have to do it all at once, and know that those small changes are going to add up one way or the other. So make changes for the good.
Come on. That's wonderful. Shauna, where can people find out more from you?
Yeah, I have a website. It's a little less toxic.com. And then sometimes I'm hanging out in stories on Instagram with shenanigans and hopefully helpful tips. And that's a little less toxic.
I love that. I'm going to post links for your website and for your Instagram in the bio. I'll also include, by the way, go get the book, go get the cookbook, Healthier Home Cook, whole food recipes, techniques, and tips for families that want to eat a little less toxic. Go get that. The link will be also in the description and in the show notes. So, Shauna, thank you so much for being on. This was absolutely a blast.
Thank you so much, Eddie. I'm so grateful for what you do. We need more of this. So you're doing a good work.
Come on. We're doing it together, so we got this.
Amen. Yeah.
One more thing. The statements in this video or audio have not been evaluated by the FDA, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration. Information provided here is not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. The information provided by this website and or by this podcast is not a substitute for a physician visit and should not be taken as medical advice of any sort or kind. This is a list of resources for further self-research and work with your personal physician if needed. By using any of this information, by watching, listening, or reading it, you are accepting responsibility for your own health and health decisions and expressly release this podcast, its participants, and its websites from any and all liability whatsoever, including that which might come from negligence. Also, don't smoke cigarettes, don't do drugs, stay in school, don't touch hot surfaces, and please wear your safety glasses when cutting wood.